All right, back to study hall with us, everybody. Today we're going deep on something pretty important, I think.
Yeah.
It's H.R. 5744.
The Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act.
Yeah, the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act of 2023.
Of 2023.
Yeah, so this is a pretty big deal for anyone, who's worried about climate change, the economy, all that stuff. So we thought we'd dig in.
How do you think?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, cool. So basically this act is all about trying to get us to pollute less by using a kind of interesting system of fees and dividends and all sorts of things. I mean, have you ever thought about how a law could actually make it cheaper for people to choose clean energy? How do you even do that?
Well, that's what this act is trying to figure out. It starts by acknowledging something pretty basic.
Yeah.
Right now, our markets don't really reflect the true cost of using fossil fuels.
Ah, interesting. We're not paying for the damage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the act is saying, hey, we need to fix that. We need to account for the harm caused by carbon emissions, the harm to our health, our environment, our future. Right.
And one way to do that is by putting a price on carbon. Enter the carbon fee.
Ooh, a carbon fee. Okay, so how did that work?
Well, it's actually pretty straightforward. The act proposes putting a fee on fossil fuels at the source. So we're talking about oil refineries, coal mines, natural gas producers, even importers bringing fossil fuels into the country.
Oh, wow. So it's like hitting it from all angles.
Exactly. And the fee would be based on the greenhouse gas content of those fuels.
Makes sense. The more you pollute, the more you pay.
Exactly. It starts at $15 per metric ton of CO2 equivalent.
Okay.
And then it goes up by $10 every year.
Every year. That's a pretty significant jump, isn't it?
It is, but there's also a built-in mechanism to adjust for inflation. So the fee stays relevant over time.
Okay, that makes sense. You don't want it to become meaningless because of inflation, right?
Exactly. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, what about farmers? What about the military?
Yeah, they use a lot of fuel. Good point.
Right, and the act does address that. It proposes exemptions for fuel used in farming.
Oh, okay. And for military purposes, essentially they would get a refund for the carbon fee they pay. Interesting. So it's not like trying to cripple those industries.
Not at all.
No.
It's about targeting the fee where it makes the most sense.
Right. But so what's the overall goal here? How much are they trying to reduce emissions by?
That's a good question. The act sets out a pretty ambitious schedule for emissions reductions. The goal is to get down to 30% below 2005 levels by 2030.
Wow.
50% below 2005 levels by 2040, and then net zero emissions by 2050.
Okay. So pretty aggressive targets there. But what if we don't hit those targets? What happens then?
Well, the act has a couple of interesting provisions for that. If we're falling behind schedule, the fee increases could be accelerated.
Ooh, okay. So it's like, hey, get your act together or it's going to cost you even more.
Exactly. But on the flip side, if we manage to reduce emissions faster than expected, the fee could actually be decommissioned.
Whoa.
Wow.
Really? They just get rid of it. Interesting.
It shows that they're willing to be flexible and adapt to changing circumstances. Now, there's another interesting piece to this puzzle. Carbon capture. Have you heard about that?
A little bit, yeah. It's like pulling carbon dioxide out of the air, right? Is that even possible? That sounds kind of sci-fi.
It does sound a bit futuristic, but the technology is actually developing rapidly, and this act wants to encourage that. It proposes offering payments to facilities that can capture and store carbon dioxide.
Payments. So it's like rewarding them for taking carbon out of the equation.
Exactly. The act defines this captured carbon as qualified carbon dioxide.
Okay.
And the facilities that can do it as qualified facilities.
Qualified facilities, got it. So it's like incentivizing this whole new industry.
Precisely. And then there's the question of what happens if businesses just decide to move their operations overseas to avoid the carbon fee.
Right, yeah. That's a good point. We don't want to just shift the problem somewhere else, do we?
Exactly. And that's where the border fee adjustment comes in.
Ooh, a border fee adjustment. All right, explain that one to me. What's that all about?
Well, think of it like a tariff. If someone wants to import fuel or carbon-intensive products from a country that doesn't have a similar carbon pricing system, they'd have to pay a fee at the border.
Ah, so it's like leveling the playing field.
Exactly. It's about preventing what's called carbon leakage.
Carbon leakage.
Catchy! Where businesses just relocate to countries with weaker environmental standards. Now, of course, we don't want to start a trade war, right?
Right. Yeah, good point. We got to be careful with that stuff.
Exactly. So the act emphasizes the importance of complying with international trade rules and promoting global cooperation on climate change. It's not about punishing other countries. It's about working together to find solutions.
Right. So, like, if a country already has their own carbon pricing system or something,
Exactly.
they might not have to pay the border fee.
Precisely. The Act leaves room for flexibility and negotiation on that front.
Okay, so we've got the carbon fee and we've got the border fee adjustment. But what happens to all that money that's collected? That's got to be a lot of cash.
It is, and that's where the dividend part comes in. The Act proposes taking all the revenue generated from the carbon fee and giving it right back to the American people in the form of monthly dividend payments.
Monthly. Whoa. Like everyone gets a check.
Everyone. And the Act is very specific about this. These dividends would not affect eligibility for any federal assistance programs.
Oh, that's good. So it's not like taking away benefits from people who need them.
Exactly. It's about ensuring that the benefits of this system are shared equitably.
I see. So it's like trying to make it fair for everyone.
Precisely. And that's a key principle that runs throughout this act. Fairness, both domestically and internationally.
Fairness, yeah. That's a good thing. So we've covered a lot here. Carbon fees, dividends, border adjustments, exemptions, international cooperation, and even carbon capture.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. But it sounds like they're really trying to think this through.
Yeah.
You know, trying to anticipate the challenges.
I think so, too.
And come up with solutions that actually work for everyone.
Exactly.
Not just for the planet, but for people, too.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is just the beginning of our deep dive, right?
Oh, we've just scratched the surface.
There's so much more to explore here.
There is.
Before we take a quick break, don't go anywhere, folks. We'll be right back.
Right back. All right, so we're back and ready to keep digging into this whole carbon fee and dividend thing. Remember we were talking about how putting a price on carbon could really shake things up in the energy world.
Right.
Like, how would that actually impact innovation?
Yeah, that was the cliffhanger. Got me all curious about, like, giant solar panel carrots and stuff. I'm ready for more.
Well, the basic idea is that if fossil fuels suddenly become more expensive, it creates a huge incentive to find cleaner alternatives.
Right.
Yeah.
Because suddenly solar, wind, all those things start looking a lot more appealing.
Right. Exactly. It's like leveling the playing field or maybe even tilting it in favor of clean energy. And that's where the innovation comes in. I mean, think about it. If there's suddenly a huge market for clean energy technologies, there's going to be a mad rush to develop them, to improve them, to make them more efficient and affordable. It's like, you know, build a better mousetrap and the world will beat a path to your door kind of thing.
Right, right. So it's not just about, like, punishing the fossil fuel industry.
Oh,
it's about creating opportunities for new industries to emerge, right?
Absolutely. And the Act recognizes this. It's not just about putting a price on carbon. It's also about supporting research and development in the clean energy sector. Like, there are provisions for funding new technologies, improving energy storage, modernizing the grid, all that good stuff.
Oh, that's cool. So it's not just about the what of clean energy, it's also about the how, right?
Exactly. It's about creating a whole ecosystem for clean energy to thrive in. But even with all that, you know me, I'm always looking for the potential hiccups, right?
Oh, no, I know. What's bugging you this time?
Well, one question that keeps coming up for me is, will the fee be high enough to actually drive the kind of transformative change we need? Like $15 per metric ton, increasing by $10 a year, that's a start. But will it be enough to really tip the scales?
That's a good point. This is the delicate balance, right?
Yeah.
Too low, and it might not make a big difference, but too high, and you could end up with, like, economic chaos, right? Exactly. And that's why the Act includes this provision for a review after 5 years by the National Academy of Sciences.
Oh, interesting.
To see if the fee is having the desired effect and to recommend any adjustments.
So it's not like set in stone.
No, it's not. It's designed to be adaptable.
Yeah.
You know, based on real-world results.
Makes sense. You got to be able to adjust course along the way, right? Like, if something's not working, you got to tweak it.
Precisely. And speaking of things not working, what about unintended consequences? Like, messing with something as complex as the energy system, there's always the risk of creating new problems while you're trying to solve old ones, right? Yeah, good point. Like, what kind of unintended consequences are we talking about here?
Well, one concern is that businesses might just pass the cost of the carbon fee onto consumers without actually reducing their emissions.
Oh, yeah. So instead of it incentivizing them to change their ways, it just becomes like another expense for them.
Exactly. And that could lead to higher prices for everything.
Yeah, yeah. Which kind of defeats the whole purpose, right?
Right. And then there's the question of how it'll impact different sectors of the economy differently, right? Some industries might be hit harder than others, you know, could lead to job losses in some areas, while creating new jobs in other.
Ooh, yeah. Those are all big questions. Like, how do you even predict that kind of stuff? It's like a giant, complicated puzzle.
It is. And it's not just about the economics, right? There are social and political implications to consider as well. Like, for example, will people actually support this carbon fee and dividend system, or will they see it as an unnecessary burden?
Oh, yeah. Public opinion is a big deal, for sure.
Yeah.
Like, if people are against it, it's not going to work, no matter how good the intentions are, right?
Exactly. And then there's the question of how it'll impact different demographics. Like, will the dividends be enough to offset higher energy costs for low-income households? Will it widen the gap between the rich and the poor? Or could it actually help to create a more equitable society?
Whoa, those are some big questions. And I guess there are no easy answers.
Right. Not really. But it's important to at least ask the questions, to think through the potential consequences, both positive and negative.
Right, because climate policy isn't just about science and economics, right? It's about people.
Exactly.
And values and justice. All that's
Precisely. And it's not just a domestic issue either. It's a global challenge.
Right, which, as we were saying earlier, can get pretty tricky, right? Like, getting all the countries in the world to agree on anything is, well, good luck with that.
Right. It's like herding cats, as they say. But this act does at least try to address that in a couple of interesting ways. Remember that border fee adjustment we talked about?
Yeah, the tariff thing.
Right. Well, that's one way to encourage other countries to adopt similar policies.
Oh, I see. So it's like, hey, if you want to sell stuff in our market, you got to play by our rules kind of thing.
Exactly. And if they do play by our rules, if they implement their own carbon pricing system, then they might not have to pay the border fee.
Okay, so it's like a carrot and stick approach.
Precisely. But it's not just about the stick, you know? There are carrots too. Like, the act encourages the Secretary of State to negotiate international agreements on climate change. And it even suggests that the border fee could be waived for countries that have strong climate policies in place.
Oh, that's cool. So it's like rewarding good behavior.
Exactly. It's about finding ways to incentivize cooperation.
Yeah.
And make it more appealing for countries to join the global effort to fight climate change.
Right, right. It's not just about us doing our own thing. It's about getting everyone on board.
Exactly. So, we've covered a lot of ground here, from innovation to unintended consequences to the complexities of international cooperation. Where does it all leave us? I think the key takeaway is this. The Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act is a really complex and ambitious piece of legislation.
Ambitious, yeah, that's one word for it.
It could potentially reshape our energy systems and how we deal with climate change. It's not a simple fix, but it's definitely sparking some important conversations, raising a lot of interesting questions.
Totally. Like, is it the perfect solution? Probably not.
Yeah.
But it's definitely worth thinking about, right?
Absolutely. And that's what we're doing here on Study Hall, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Thinking about it, analyzing it, trying to understand the potential impacts.
And hopefully helping our listeners do the same. All right, ready for round 3?
Let's do it.
All right, welcome back to Study Hall, everyone. Phew, we've been through a lot with this Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. Like, my brain is officially full. Carbon fees, dividends, international stuff, innovation. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot to unpack, but I think it's helpful to zoom out for a second and look at the bigger picture here. What's the overall goal? What are we really trying to achieve with this?
Yeah, good point. Like, what's the big takeaway here? Help me connect the dots.
Well, to me, it's not just about tweaking a few policies. It's about fundamentally changing how we think about energy and the environment, like our whole relationship with those things.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
For forever, we've built our economies and our lives around cheap and abundant fossil fuels, right?
Yeah.
But that comes with a cost, a huge cost that we're seeing now with climate change.
Right. Right. It's like we can't keep doing the same thing and expect different results, right?
Right. Exactly. And this act is basically saying, hey, we need to change the rules of the game. We need to make clean energy the more attractive option, not just economically, but also for our values and our future.
So it's not just about reducing emissions. It's about a whole shift in mindset.
That's exactly it. And that's where the role of government comes in. This act seems to be saying that the government has a responsibility to step in and guide us towards a more sustainable future. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. But that can be controversial, right? Like, some people might see it as an overreach of government power.
Absolutely. It's a tricky balance. You have the urgency of climate change on one hand and concerns about economic impacts, individual freedom, and the role of government on the other. It's tough.
Yeah, no easy answers here. But hey, at least we're having the conversation, right?
That's the important part. We need to be talking about this, debating the different approaches, and, figuring out what works best. Collectively, I mean.
Okay, so we've talked about the big picture, the role of government, the potential for, controversy and stuff. But let's get practical for a second. What would this actually look like if it became law? For everyday people?
Well, imagine this. Every month you get a check in the mail. Your carbon dividend. A little bonus to help with any potential price increases.
Sign me up. But yeah, those price increases, what about them? How would this act affect businesses and consumers?
As fossil fuels get more expensive, businesses will want to switch to cleaner options.
Right.
So we might see a big increase in demand for things like solar panels, wind turbines, electric cars, all that cool stuff. And as those clean technologies become more common, it could create new jobs in manufacturing, installation, maintenance, you name it.
Right. So it's not just about, punishing polluters. It's about creating opportunities for new industries to grow.
Exactly. But of course, we have to remember that this is just one scenario, right? Things could go differently. There are a lot of factors involved, like how the act is implemented, how businesses and consumers react, and what happens in the global energy market.
Right, right. It's complex. There are no guarantees.
Yeah.
But hey, at least it's a step in the right direction, right?
Yeah.
Maybe a big step.
I think so. It shows that we're taking climate change seriously and trying to find solutions that work for everyone. Not just for us, but for, future generations, too. It's a big deal.
Yeah, totally. Well, we've covered a ton of ground today, from the tiny details of this act to the massive implications for, pretty much everything. It's been quite a deep dive.
It has, and I've really enjoyed chatting about it with you.
Me too. And thanks to everyone for listening to Study Hall. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep those brains buzzing. We'll catch you next time.